Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our third PandeVITA video talk. We are broadcasting from our broadcast studio of the Department of Communication and Design at Bilkent University in Ankara, and we are happy to having you here. First of all, I have to describe, you cannot see it, but here in the studio we have only camera women, which fits to our topic, which is COVID-19 impact on gender equality. The COVID-19 pandemic time was coined by lockdown measures and social distancing. Especially women and other vulnerable people were at risk. A study conducted by our project PandeVITA revealed that the action taken during the pandemic affected women and men differently. According to the United Nations Rapid Gender Assessment Survey, cases of domestic violence against women had increased. The pandemic had devastating social and economic consequences for women and girls. Now the pandemic time is almost over. But how is the situation for women and men now? Did we learn from the pandemic time? Are there any sustainable concepts which protect vulnerable people in a sustainable way? These and other topics I would like to discuss with expert and distinguished guests, which I would like to introduce now. First, please welcome with me Nazlı Özlem Atmaca. She was born in 1974 in Erzurum. She graduated from Ankara University Faculty of Law in 1996, and she has been working as a freelance lawyer in Ankara for 25 years. She is also graduate from Anadolu University Open Education Faculty, Media and Communication Department. She is a member of the Ankara Bar Association and the president of the Ankara Bar Association Gelincik Center. According to her, never give up. We have a great power. We can control our imagination and mind. Don't forget, hope is always within us, and hope gives joy of living. Thank you very much for your coming. We are happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce you Yasemin Gümüş Ağca. She is an instructor at the Graphic Design Department at Bilkent University, Ankara in Turkey, and she is a member of our PandeVITA research project. Currently, she is teaching in the field of art and culture, advertising, design and aesthetics, and her research interests includes philosophy of art, media studies, race and gender in digital media. Beside her research in the PandeVITA project, she is a member of the task force Gender and Platforms in the Horizon project, UMIPLAT. Welcome, Yasemin Gümüş Ağca.
Thanks for having me.
And I forgot to tell, according to her, COVID-19 pandemic has sharpened gender inequality, which should be fought at levels of science and society. We have also an online guest, a Zoom guest, and I would like to welcome now Professor Paola Tordini. She was graduated from La Sapienza University in Rome, Faculty of Law in 1996. She teaches civil law and violence against women at eCampus University in Novedrate in Italy, where she is responsible for internationalization. Now she is the director of the Center of Scientific Cooperations and Development at Al-Quds University in Palestine. And according to her, the economic impact of the pandemic has been felt mainly by women. Fewer jobs, increased domestic work, etc. Women's economic empowerment is one of the fundamental components for achieving gender equality. Welcome, Paola Tordini. But I do not want to talk only with my distinguished guests. I would like you, the audience, also to contribute with questions. No, so therefore, we open the chat room in the YouTube channel. Please ask questions, discuss topics, whatever you want. If you have questions to the guests at that moment, please write it in the chat. My production team will check them and give me later a bunch of questions which I will ask the guests. No? If you have concrete questions to one special guest, please write it in the chat as well. And we have another offer. No, we want you to participate with a Mentimeter poll. No, so therefore, you can have a look at the QR code, what we would like to show you at the moment, and please open your smartphone, scan the QR code, or write in the URL in the browser. And I directly would like to start with a Mentimeter question. If you have your mobile now active, please answer the question: were gender issues considered adequately during the pandemic time, yes or no? Now, we discuss the result a little bit later because during the broadcast we have a delay for the online audience, so therefore we want to see how the online audience decide or vote as well. No? So therefore I would like to start with a question to Nazle Atmaca. You are president of Gelinjek, and first of all, especially our international audience would like to know, what is Gelinjek?
Okay, thank you for being here today, for your kind invitation. It's my pleasure to attend your video talk program. To discuss the impact of COVID-19 on gender equality and the lessons we have learned, it's a big chance for us also. And I'm excited to share my insights with you in a more casual and conversational style. Thank you very much, first of all. And let me give some information about our Gelinjek Center. Gelinjek Center is a project founded by the Ankara Bar Association April 2011. Gelinjek Center consists of guides and volunteer lawyers who are experts in their fields, and also they have received some special trainings about regarding physical, psychological, economic and sexual violence against women, children, and also vulnerable individuals who are exposed to violence or neglect or abuse. In Gelinjek Center, there are 45 guide lawyers, and also we have 524 volunteer lawyers. Victims of violence can reach the Gelinjek Center by calling a telephone. Maybe it's good to say this telephone: 444 4306. This telephone number they can reach always whole day and all the week, 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. We provide training, consultancy, and legal aid duties. Our Gelinjek Center's philosophy is raising awareness in prevention of violence against women, to prevent violence and ensuring access to justice, especially for victims.
So it means it is not only for victims already, it is also to prevent violence in families
families,
against women and so on.
children, yes, also disadvantaged individuals, yes. We have two offices. One of them is maybe we can say in the center of the Ankara, in Kızılay, in Ankara Bar Association's building, and the other is in Sincan, and it is in the West Courthouse in Sincan. And a guide lawyer is available in these offices between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. And also at the weekends, all the women or applicants can reach our phone number even in the at the weekends, and especially during the meeting, guide lawyer and the applicant and an application form filled out by the lawyer. And in this form, there are some information or assessments of guide lawyer about the victim or about the applicant.
Yeah, and may I ask, so you said that 300 voluntary lawyers are working. This is really amazing, and I really appreciate this work. Are they all working in Kızılay and Sincan? I have to explain for the foreign guests, Kızılay and Sincan are both districts in Ankara.
Yes.
Are they all working in these offices, or are there also some dependences outside of
No,
Ankara?
our center is working, and all our volunteer lawyers is working in Ankara. Unfortunately, we cannot send some of our lawyers to outside of Ankara. Unfortunately, just in Ankara, but in everywhere from Turkey, they can reach us by our phone number.
Yeah.
But in Ankara, just we can give some duties to our lawyers, just in Ankara.
Yeah,
Yes.
but really wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
I liked your statement very much, because it was very positive.
Yes.
Never give up.
Yes.
Hope gives us joy of living. I cannot agree more. But it sounds on the other side also as if there are too many women who lost their hope or their joys of living. Is it like this? And why is it like this?
Unfortunately, yes, it's like this because in Gelecek Center, I and my colleagues, we met many women who lost their confidence, their hopeness, their dreams, and their joy of living. And we would like to bring their hopes and joy of living. These women would like to feel safe and need to be supported. Therefore, in order to be hope and source of strength for these women, we always use this sentence also to them. And I and my colleagues in Gelecek Center make these women feel confident and peaceful because it's very important for them. It's very important to feel confidence for these victims. And that's why I use this sentence also here.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Yeah, should we just have a look at the poll where we ask, were gender issues considered adequately during the pandemic time? Maybe I can see the result. Yes. So as we see, the very most of them said it is not considered adequately during the pandemic time. Might be the reason, Yasmin?
First of all, when we talk about women, they are, in the first place, they are regarded as the marginalized groups in society. They are on the margins of society. They are like vulnerable in terms of keeping their jobs, in terms of keeping their financial status, in terms of running their houses, keeping their families and children safe and healthy and so on. Women have more responsibilities in terms of keeping a good life or keeping well-being. So, and because of the lockdowns, I mean, one of the keywords that we hear mostly about during the pandemic time was the lockdown, the enforcement of lockdowns. And women were the first group and the most crowded group who were enforced at home. And they had to work from home. So they, I mean, because they had to work from home and they are supposed to fit in home more than men, they had more and more responsibilities. So managing their jobs along with managing children and their school and online education and all these things, a women's life became more and more difficult during the pandemic's time. And we don't see today when we look back in, for instance, 2021 and 22, we don't see a lot of regulations or enforcements, laws, or other acts that ensured women's rights and their facilities that give these rights back to women.
You executed within the scope of the PandeVITA project together with a research group of our partner Ankara University University a task about gender issues in pandemic times. And I'm quite interested in you stated that gender inequality should be fought at levels of science and society. Why science and society? Why in the interaction between science and society?
Yes. When we talk about gender, because gender is a social identity that we choose, we identify ourselves with. So it is a social construct, and gender is experienced at the social level, at the society level. You can live your gender, live the demands or needs or joys of your gender in society by making sure that you are identifying with that society, by making sure that that society is taking care of you. And the society, in order to ensure these things, depends on science. Like, for instance, you have to get some data about who is losing their jobs while who is keeping their jobs, or who is having more financial difficulties and problems, who is subjected to violence at home. So science and society in those times of crisis, according to me, and this is actually a result that we have experienced so much, science and society should work together, should function in parallel to each other in the times of crisis, because they rely on each other, their well-being rely on each other. It is like the society gives data, it gives regulations, it gives information, it gives scientific information from the science, while the science reflects that society and ensures that, or makes people more aware of the shortcomings and mistakes that are done.
Yeah.
So they have to depend on each other in a very successful sense.
And how did you enable or supported the interaction between science and society within the scope of the PandeVITA project?
First of all, our project, how can I say, in PandeVITA project, we made research before we began our implementation of our app, PandeVITA, and in order to, can I say it? We made a lot of research concerning the women's lives and concerning other gender groups, other vulnerable groups, and tried to reach some data about their difficulties. Like, for instance, access to health regulations, access to the health system, access to medicine, for instance, or access to very basic information about transportation, about wayfinding, about jobs, about going to the supermarket, finding your supplies, whatever you might think of as basic in society. So these things, we made some research about these things and how women found or how women could not find these things. And we also made some research concerning what we should implement in the app, what kind of regulations should we, for instance, should we adopt, because we also have to protect the rights, the social rights of the app users and so on. So these things were all we were all concerned about these things and made our research regarding these things.
Thank you. Paula, from Roma at the moment, but in the introduction I already mentioned you are traveling at the moment between two different worlds. One world is in Roma and the other one is in Palestine, Jerusalem, as far as I know. So what are you doing there in Palestine?
Yes, now I'm the director of the Scientific Center for Cooperation and Development of a Palestinian university, that is the Al-Quds University. The center is a joint center that is established in Palestine, in Abu Dis, that is close to Jerusalem, with the support of ODIMED. ODIMED is an Italian association, as an NGO that has between his associated some universities, some bar association, some municipalities. The center would like to stress the strong relation that exists between market, business, corporate responsibility, human rights, and society. And for that reason, we established this center, and the center aims to build a system of stable relationship between European and MENA market stakeholders, such as companies, bar associations, freelancers, institutions, etc. It is a network of cooperation that under the scientific support of the university, aims to develop human rights oriented business relationship in the Mediterranean area. In our activity, we have several goals, and among different goals, we have one that is very important for us, that is the gender empowerment, and in the meantime, to support the position of women, especially in some parts of the world that are living some criticism, and we try to support the empowerment of the woman through action addressed to demolish stereotypes, or to help them to build their future as entrepreneurs, as a professional person, like professor university or whatever. One of the main work we have to do, but it's not so far away from some kind of problems that we have also in Italy, is to work on the society in order to show that a woman can be, in the meantime, a business woman, or a judge, or other kind of works that fit with their personality of each one of us. And in the meantime, we can be mothers, we can be wives, so that we can have a normal life as all the other human beings. So the idea is to let women be active part in the market, also in some society where everything is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, very interesting. I know that Italy suffered really a lot in the pandemic time, especially at the beginning. We heard the very most of the very, very bad news about victims, people who died, came from Italy. How was the situation in Palestine?
The situation in Palestine was different from Italy. It was not so, especially at the beginning, it was not so so strong as it was, because we were the first country in Europe, and we faced with something that we were not ready to face with. And in the meantime, I have to say, generally, the globalization sometimes creates some problems, because we forgot to have some goods that are basic for us, like a mask and so on. We haven't at that time. It was so complicated, everything. Palestine, from this perspective, was I was not at that time in Palestine, but for what I know from my friends and colleagues there, was a little bit better. Aside that, Palestine is affected on some specific criticism that creates more problem in the especially for women. I have to say, because for example, there are problems in the linked with violence, problems linked with reunification of family. You know, this two-state solution is not possible. It's possible where you can move, which kind of ID you have. It, especially in Jerusalem, is not easy at all. There are several centers. The university where I am now, Al-Quds University, has several centers in Jerusalem in order to help, especially women that face with this kind of problem. Now, one of the work we are doing with the center is addressed to work together with Italians and maybe with the other countries. We are lucky, and this project can be improved in order to, as I told you before, to destroy some kind of stereotypes that by a perspective of the future of where we are going, represent really an obstacles. I don't know how is in Turkey. I know just marginally, but for sure in Italy, in Palestine, and let me say in the south of all the Mediterranean area, stereotypes play a very important role in the achievement of the equality.
Yeah. And related with the problems and especially in the context of violence against women or women at work, are there typical differences what you could identify in the comparison between Italy and Palestine or this region?
For sure, the main problem is that some of them, they cannot move, and they cannot reach the other side of the land, that is Israel. And you know, there are very strong problem between Israel and the West Bank, problem linked with the chance to move from one side and other. There are several families that are cut. A part of the family is in one side of the territory, another part is on the other side. And another big problem, for example, is in the reunification of this family, or when a woman from the West Bank marries someone that is has the permission to be and has the residence in Jerusalem, that is administrative under Israel. So this kind of woman that lives in this small territory, that lives a very difficult situation. Aside that, there are nomads, women that came from Bedou groups of people that lives extreme difficulties.
Yeah, I understand.
I would like now to start the discussion about violence against women. But before we start I start with the first question. I would like to start a Mentimeter poll again. This is a very generic one, and of course, it cannot be a representative question. But I would like to know, wherever you are, how well were women protected according to your understanding, according to your feeling, by national laws? Were it very well? Do you have the feeling the women were very well protected, or not protected at all? So it is in fact a kind of scale question. So you can place the scale wherever you want, or according to your understanding. Before we have a look at the results, I would like to start with a question to Nazlı. In Turkey, there is a platform which is called We Will Stop the Femicide platform, and according to this, there is a statistic which says 44% of the femicides in 2021 were executed by husbands, and followed by partners, 13%, so much fewer, acquaintance, 9%, ex-husbands, 8%, and only 4 of the murderers are unidentified. So it means from this statistic, this very sad statistic, we can understand the very most of the victims knew their murderers. How can we better protect them? What is, for example, the suggestion of Gelincik?
Yes, in pandemic period, we can say that violence against women increased tremendously. In pandemic period, especially physical violence against women increased. And this violence, unfortunately, come from their partners, their husbands, sometimes their fathers or brothers. Yet it's a big challenge that women have directly affected violence at home and from their families or friends. And some other statistics I would like to share with you. Men have who have used alcohol, and this resulted in an increased domestic violence. And also in the pandemic, offender crimes using weapons and crimes are committed even in the daytime during the pandemic period. And the reason men have committed crime more in the pandemic than at other times are due to having lost income, unemployment, and unstable economy increase.
Yeah, may I just ask a question, because you said the crime at daytime. Did it increase during the pandemic time?
Yes, especially in pandemic time, it's increased. How can we protect women against violence or the other vulnerable individuals? Maybe it's very important working together with different institutions, organizations to prevent violence against women. We made sure that the law is more effective and can be enforced properly. For example, maybe in Turkey also electronic handcuffs. We used electronic handcuffs for people who commit violence. And electronic handcuffs upgraded from 500 to 1,500, and it's a way to protect women. And also we can, for example, sometimes we have protection decisions from courthouse about the victims, and if a woman address is confidential in this protection decision, she can easily go to the hospital or enroll her child in school without any difficulty. How can we do it? We can make a corporation, and we can make it possible for administrative institutions, hospitals, schools to keep track of these protection decisions for victims. And we try to make this, we learned because, and let me give some information about an application. In Turkish, it's named KADES. In English, it is a Women Support Application. It is an application of Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Republic of Turkey, and women victims of violence were able to reach the police more quickly using this application. And also maybe we can change our minds to prevent these victims.
Yeah. What I'm interested in this is, first of all, so these kind of applications sounds really convincing, and I'm sure it helps a lot. But for example, I can imagine that victims are not directly aware that they will be murdered or that there will be a threat of violence or whatever. And I have another statistics from the time between 2010 and 2017, so it means before the pandemic times, and it shows that only 33 of 572 victims made an institutional appeal about their husbands. So it means it is obviously a kind of barrier to blame the husbands or whatever. And I can imagine when it is a lockdown situation, the situation might be even worse. How can we protect these people, or which kind of suggestions do you have as the president of Gelinjik Center?
For example, in pandemic days, we continued our duties in Gelinjik Center. It's very important, I think. Maybe we couldn't keep guard face to face, but just 2 months we canalized our phone to our personal phones. But we noticed that women trust our center, and they need confidence, self-confidence. Yes, they are afraid of their husbands, or they are afraid of making some applies, because it's difficult for us. And our center would like to give some consultancy about that. It is very important also. They know the meaning of violence. We try to we give trainings about it also, and we say that we are always with you to the victims. And also our Ankara Bar Association have a cooperation with some psychological centers. And our volunteer psychologists give some psychological support to these victims. We try to support these women also legal and psychological ways.
Yasmin, you are a member of the task force Gender and Platform in the Other Horizon project, where you are a researcher, UMIPLAT. And we talked a little bit before about that, and that what we found also in the data when we analyzed social media posts is that there are so unbelievable many examples of femicides which were executed, or which happened during the pandemic time, especially in the year 2021. Tell us a little bit about which kind of posts were they, and how is the relation? Do these platforms help somehow to reveal, to make these kind of crimes visible?
Obviously, I mean, obviously. UMEPLAT is a project where we analyze Europeanization, Turkey's process of Europeanization on social media platforms. So we for the past 2 years, we have been looking at social media platforms and analyzing some posts that are directly about gender. This is just one dimension of the whole work, as you know. And when we look at the data covering, for instance, 6 months of 2021, we find a lot of posts about violence, femicide, and also which are these posts are also addressing the breaking up with Istanbul Convention also. So there is a direct parallel, direct relationship between the overthrowing of some legal protection or some regulations and the increase in the violence against women.
Before we talk about this, maybe we can have a look at the at our our Mentimeter, and there we see that most of them say that in fact the protection on the national level is not really super, let's say. Now, when we think about the Istanbul Convention, so Turkey was one of the first who signed the Istanbul Convention. Maybe you know, is the Istanbul Convention is a very comprehensive international human rights treaty on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. And unfortunately, let's say, Turkey was the first one which withdraw from that. And when we see, we know all this is not a representative statistic what we generated now. But when there are obviously people who do not have the feeling that on the national level the law is strong enough, is it really a good idea to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention?
Of course not. I don't think so. Of course not, because I mean, Istanbul Convention has remained as a very strong, security convention for women, which they depended on so much. I mean, at the workplace, in their homes, when they are with their families, with their partners. But when we withdrew from the Istanbul Convention, its results became more and more visible in society. This is, I mean, it is very often addressed on social media because there are a lot of events concerning the violence and women, the involvement of men and so on. And when we think of these things, when we consider all the results, the numbers, the statistics, because we also looked at a lot of reports, national and international reports, and the results are just obviously showing that it's not a good idea, it's not a logical idea.
Yes, of course.
To
Now we try to protect our law on protection of the family and prevention of violence against women. We try to protect this law because we are not in Istanbul Convention now, and that is the just only one law about the violence against women. Then we try to protect this law. Yes.
And in fact, the official statement of the Turkish government was women's rights are guaranteed in national laws and therefore there is no need for international law. Can you agree?
No, of course not. Of course not. It's not a true idea. We have to make security places for women. We have to make strong laws, legal treatments and applications, and also we have to give, I think, education about gender equality to everyone from kindergarten, and we have to clear wrong beliefs, wrong feelings from our minds. We have to struggle for gender equality and prevent violence against women. And this is not a suitable way to have just only a national law. It's important to have international conventions. We have to protect also international conventions.
Paola, the number of femicides in Italy are lower than in Turkey, but the situation is definitely not better, according to my understanding. So according to the Guardians, they published a statistic, 125 femicides in Italy between August 21 and July 22, so in the pandemic time, and 108 were committed in family emotional settings. So the situation is nearly the same. How do you understand it, and what can we learn, or how tries the Italian law to protect women in this issue?
Yes, the situation is not easy at all. After a small period, that we can say the first 2 weeks of pandemic, there was a reduction of the cases. But after that, the number of cases rise incredibly on. And just think that only having a look on the hotline, the helping line, after the 2 weeks of the beginning of the pandemic, they call for asking for a help. Because women are living some violence against them that are domestic violence, increase of 73%. That is a very high increasement. What to say? We have a very interesting, very strong, very well done law. That is, it's the so-called Red Code law, is the law number 69 of 2019. Is a law that aims to protect women and girls through the effective and timely safeguard of victims of gender-based violence and domestic violence, while avoiding any administrative or judicial slowdown. Despite that, the situation was very complicated. And imagine that also during pandemic, some services like the anti-violence and stalking helping line, the number 1522, and other centers anti-violence, they continue to work, obviously, in compliance with the required hygienic commitment. And in addition to that, the majority of the institutions continue to work in order to protect women because, as you say, it's a very important, very strong problem in Italy, especially linked with domestic violence. But despite all these tools, we continue to have a huge number of victims. So we have to think on why. If we have very strong legislation in order to punish the responsible of the domestic violence, if we have a system of protection by an administrative perspective, maybe, and I want to link my speech with the speech of the other two colleagues, maybe we have to think on the perspective of the Istanbul Convention that put the education as one of the main and most important tools that we have in order to act against violence against women in the long period. We have to change the mentality of the people. We have to teach to our son the respect of the gender, because the future men that are going to that could act against women are our son. So in my perspective, the only solution is to work as in the prevention way, using a strong administrative and cultural movement that can that can modify the perception of gender. Aside that, the same situation, but with specific need, is in Palestine. Comparing with Italy, sorry if I stress this point, but is very
maybe
important
I
to
can
me.
interrupt you. I can directly ask you a question from the audience when you talk about Palestine. One of our audiences asked, based on your observation, is there a stark contrast between the public response in Italy and Palestine toward the difficulties faced by women during the pandemic?
Yes, for sure there must be there was this kind of problem with the difference that belongs to each single country, and the difference are very important also because, for example, if we can say in Italy that we have a very strong law in protecting women, what is necessary in Palestine is to have a specific protection by the law. A lot of work is done. A lot of work is ongoing. For example, in our university, we are establishing with the law faculty a center that is addressed to spread the culture of gender equality and so on. So to study the phenomenon of violence against women and etc. But it's not enough. It's necessary to have a strong legislation for the punishment of the crimes. And aside that, we need to modify the culture. We need to modify the society, as I told you. This is my perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nazle, I have also a question to you from the audience. Someone asked, you have talked about the high femicide rates in Turkey. Considering the underlying social, cultural and systematic reason of femicide, what other things can be done in order to combat these problems in the long term other than the Istanbul Convention?
Yes. We can learn, as we learned from pandemic period, we can have some lessons that we need provide better support for women who experienced domestic violence. Yes, we need helplines and maybe safe places for them to go, and we need a strong law, and we need these laws effectively deal with violence against women. And I think to be better prepared for these crises, we have to consider gender in all stages of emergency planning and response. That means looking at how different situations affect men and women differently, and making sure that women have a say in decision making, and creating targeted solutions for their specific challenges for women. It is not, we cannot do it by just using law. Of course, we can make other things, as I said before.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's another question for Yasemin from the audience. Someone asked, your work includes research on gender in digital media. In your observation, has digital media addressed gender issues during the pandemic time?
Yes, but in very certain dimensions. Gender is one of the issues that is very often addressed in social media. Like, for instance, very famous platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. But there are also some challenges against women's, or women, let's say women's presence on social media. because when we analyze some posts about gender, we analyze them according to some dimensions, like for instance, we regarded the dimension of law, we regarded the dimension of institutions, we regarded the dimension of government or politics, and in our research we show that our results show that yes, gender issues are addressed, but they are never addressed, or very little, very rarely addressed in terms of legal protection. Or when women verbalized or raised their voices against, for instance, femicides, against, for instance, violence, it was not, in a sense, in terms of law, but it was showing a dimension of people. Just the names were mentioned. The names of the perpetrators, the names of the criminals, the names of the women, or the places, some details were mentioned, but we see a lack of legal protection or legal address in these things. So yes, there is address against women, against women's issues, against women's problems, but these things have some distinct characteristics.
When we come now back to the topic, what we discussed in this context already a little bit, women at work. You executed, in fact, you mentioned it in PandeVITA research, and I found it quite interesting, especially the analysis about the gender aspects in COVID-19 crisis showed that the much more women than men worked in home office.
Yes.
This sounds a little bit odd. I thought lockdown was for both the same, but obviously
Yes.
women were more there. What can be the reason? Do you have an idea?
Because women are usually regarded as fitting more to the domestic space, while men are regarded fitting more to the social space. So, and women, because women are also associated with the responsibility to take care of their children, and all dimensions of education is executed. It was executed during the pandemic period. It was executed at home. The school children, the young children, they all depended on their mothers or grandmothers, for instance, their sisters, to take care of them. And also, women are regarded, or they are considered less in need of the social resources in terms of jobs. Like for instance, when you ask a woman, or as we saw in those posts about gender or women's issues, women are usually asked questions about their job, and the second question would come like, where do you work? Is it difficult to manage all those things? I mean, all addressing their gender issues, indeed, all addressing the problems related with gender. So they are considered as most demanded at the domestic space, while men are considered best fitting into the social space, economically, socially, politically, at all levels, indeed.
Yeah. So it means, when I understand you correctly, women in home offices have the burden for both, to work on the one hand side, but also at the same time to take care of the children.
And the house at the same time.
And the house at the same
Maybe
time.
they can balance their jobs and their personal lives.
They were expected to balance.
Yes, they were expected to balance.
Yeah, yeah. Before we, I would like to come back to the topic about educational rights. So Paula was mentioning already, and I saw that you totally agreed with that. I would like to ask a last Mentimeter question. Please take your smartphone once again and answer the question: what are, according to you, the biggest problems for women in pandemic times? So we have several options: domestic violence, home office, the employment of women, children's education, or whatever. And so we have a look at the result later. Nazle, So you totally agreed what Paula said. The education also in order to avoid domestic violence is very important.
It's, yes, it's, I totally agree with my colleague Paula. Yes, it's very important to give education about gender equality to prevent violence and femicide against women. It's very important. As I said before, it must be begin from kindergarten. And the whole life we have to learn gender equality. It's a way to prevent women and vulnerable individuals. I totally agree.
Are there concepts, maybe also in your environment of the Gelinjik Center or wherever?
We try to give trainings about gender equality, and our philosophy is that we try to make awareness about violence, and we try to prevent violence. Then we didn't do just consultancy. We also give trainings, and we would like to make people awareness about violence. Yes.
Yasmin, you are not only researcher, you are also a mother of a young daughter. How is your perception about these kind of educational measures in the context of the education of your daughter in the primary school, for example?
Yeah. It's a nice experience to see her because she is also, I mean, I have a female child, first of all, who is going to become a woman member of the society. But it is, there are good and bad experiences because I see her growing up as a free person, as a person who can talk about what she wants and what she doesn't want, and so on. But what I see in her formal education is that there is still a strong lack of education in that sense. I mean, when I look at her books, for instance, or we have some talks in the evening about how she spent her day at school and so on, but she does not, there is no mention to education at all levels about, for instance, gender equality or violence, the protection against violence and so on. So that it should be a part of the formal education, first of all,
Yes,
all these things.
Yes.
It is not sufficient that we teach our daughters and sons these things at home, because school is the most formal place and it is the only formal place these children learn. And actually, I mean, it's a little bit sad, but children take their teachers and the school environment more serious than they take their parents, indeed. So it should be integrated into the schools as soon as possible. This is my experience.
Let's have a look on the result of the last Mentimeter. You have to help me a little bit as far as I see, because the font is a little bit small. Children's education is regarded as one of the biggest problems beside domestic violence. Is this something what surprised you, Nazle, or is it something what you expected? No, and employment of women is also quite strong. No? But is it something what you expected?
No, I don't expect this kind of results, but also
It's of course not representative. No? It is
yes,
just
yes, of course, but it's also a big problem, children's education in pandemic period, and also it's very it's big problem also women employing. Because millions of female domestic workers work informally and they lose their job in pandemic period, and it's also a big result of pandemics. But also it's domestic violence is increased very high degree in pandemic period. But maybe our audience think like that. I respect them.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a little bit different,
Yeah.
different results for
Yeah,
me. But also they are also important results of
Yeah.
pandemic
Yeah.
period.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to come now to a final statement, maybe beginning with you, Nazle. I would like to know, is there in fact a lesson learned during the pandemic? It was pandemic a time where we not only suffered, where we could understand certain topics better in order to increase, for example, the protection of women.
Yes, one big lesson we learned, we need to provide better support for women, especially experienced domestic violence, and we need some safe places, and we need strong legislations, law, and also we need international conventions also make effectively. And one thing also, it's an important lesson. We need some flexible work arrangements, and maybe even after the pandemic ends, this is something that should continue, because it's a good thing for women. Women can have flexible work options to remote work, and they can do their job at home. Maybe also some women are continue to work at home, and but we cannot feel ourselves comfortable. We have to stay vigilant, and we turn the lessons we learned into long-lasting solutions. We need to invest in strong healthcare systems, social protection programs, and inclusive education and training that address the specific needs of women and other vulnerable groups. I have to say like that.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yasemin, are there lessons which we learned from the pandemic, and what are they, if there are?
Yeah, obviously there are lessons, but there are lessons learned. But when there is something learned, there is also a next exam that you have to justify what you learn. So this is maybe the first and the biggest pandemic that we experience in a global level, but it's not going to be the last one. So we have been, every day, we are still reminded that we should be ready for whatever comes in our way, especially in the future. So we need to ensure the political and economic rights of women, first of all, in order to support themselves, especially during lockdowns, during those times of entrapment that I can say. And again, we should, without waiting for longer, we should implement a lot of regulations and these lessons into the curriculum of education. Indeed, if there are lessons, then we should obviously use those lessons.
Paola, in Italy, or also from the perspective of Palestine, what did we learn about gender issues in the context of the pandemic, that we are maybe better prepared for the next pandemic time?
This is a very difficult answer. I think that everything must pass through the empowering of women. Empowering of women, that means educate the society inside the family to the gender equality, demolishing stereotypes, educate to the respect of gender, but doing that in all sectors, including the respect against economic violence. That means let women achieve the chance to have an economic independence. We need to empower women. And I think that in the long period strategy, that could be an effective solution to achieve our goal.
Yeah,
Yeah, Paola Todini.
Yasemin Gümüş Aja, and Nazla Atmaja, thank you very much for coming. It was a very inspiring time for me to talk and discuss this topic. And of course, thank you very much to the audience. I would like to invite you to the next PandeVITA talk on next Tuesday, May the 30th. We will discuss there the topic of reliability of news in pandemic times. I'm sure it is also an important and interesting topic. And furthermore, I would like to make a little bit advertisement for our international PandeVITA conference at Bilkent University, which we will execute on the 8th and the 9th of June. In these 2 days, we will present more details of our research. And additionally, we have very interesting contributions from foreign guests, from keynote speakers. Please have a look, inform yourself, and register on www.pandevita-ankara.eu. Now I wish you all wonderful evening, stay healthy, and iyi akşamlar.